My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 31 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I run a small interior design firm that specializes in transforming small spaces, apartments, townhouses, even local cafes, into places that carry emotion, intention, and memory. I'm not rich, but I earn enough to support myself, care for my husband, and provide for my daughter, Lily, who's 8 years old and the light of my life. I wasn't born into wealth. In fact, my family came from modest beginnings, but my parents, Gerald and Marianne, worked tirelessly to craft a different illusion. My father owned a popular furniture store in town, and my mother always carried herself with calculated elegance, designer handbags, polished smiles, conversations filled with rehearsed charm. To them, success wasn't about peace of mind or purpose. It was about status, admiration, and always being perceived as superior. Outsiders often looked at our family as a picture of harmony. A well-dressed couple with 2 children and a beautiful home. But from the inside, I knew better. Love in my family was not unconditional. It was performative, transactional, and rarely directed my way. I have a younger brother, Brandon, just 2 years behind me, and from as early as I can remember, the scales were never balanced between us. I was the achiever, the one who earned straight A's, got into college on her own, started working at 16 to buy her own textbooks. But in my household, effort didn't translate into recognition. I still remember the day I aced my 8th grade math exam. I proudly showed my score to my mother, and all she said was, "Good. That's what you're supposed to do." That same year, Brandon brought home a B+ on a history paper, and suddenly there were cupcakes, balloons, and a mini celebration in the kitchen. I stood by the fridge watching them toast him with sparkling cider as if he'd just landed a scholarship to Yale. I never blamed Brandon. He didn't have to try. He was simply adored. It wasn't his fault. But I felt like I had to claw for every ounce of acknowledgement, and even then, it wasn't guaranteed. When I got accepted into an architecture program in Chicago, my mother barely looked up from her magazine. "That must have been hard," she said flatly. "Just make sure you don't waste it." But when Brandon got into a community college 2 towns over, there was a full-blown farewell party, a live band, social media posts captioned, "Proud of our amazing son, chasing his dreams." That's when I stopped expecting anything from them. I buried the hurt, poured myself into work, and carved a path that was mine alone. Over time, I went from renting a desk in a shared office to running my own small firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And then I met Jason, a quiet, kind electrical engineer, while inspecting a model apartment for a new client. We talked about lighting, mood, and how the right color could soften an entire space. A year later, we were married. Soon after, Lily was born. Curious eyes just like mine, and a soft smile just like his. For a while, it felt like I had finally built something solid, something safe. But I had no idea how quickly everything could change, or how deeply I would one day regret believing, even for a second, that family might be there when it mattered most. The first few years after Lily was born weren't easy. Jason and I were constantly juggling bills, skipping luxuries, and cutting corners just to stay afloat. I continued running my design firm from a tiny studio near our apartment, while Jason worked long shifts at a local construction company. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. Our apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms and a narrow living room, but it overlooked a park where children's laughter filtered through the windows every afternoon. Lily loved it there. She'd sit by the window with her picture books, her little feet swinging off the couch, asking endless questions about the world outside. She was healthy, curious, and always smiling. That smile was my oxygen. Still, there was one thing I kept putting off: health insurance. It wasn't that I didn't want to be responsible. It was just, every time I opened the enrollment forms and saw the monthly premiums, I froze. Between rent, utilities, payroll for my one assistant, and groceries, insurance always felt like a luxury we couldn't afford just yet. Jason and I were both in good health. Lily had never even had a serious cold. So I told myself, next month. Just one more month. I didn't realize how dangerous those words would become. One brisk afternoon in late autumn, Lily started coughing. It was dry at first, nothing alarming. We made her chamomile tea, bundled her in cozy pajamas, and kept her warm through the night. She still giggled at bedtime stories and asked for Jason's homemade mac and cheese. But as the days passed, the cough worsened. At night, she'd wake up gasping, clutching her chest, and crying in confusion. We took her to a local clinic. The doctor listened carefully and said it was likely bronchitis. He prescribed antibiotics and told us to monitor her symptoms, but I couldn't ignore the look he gave Lily when he thought I wasn't watching. A worried glance that held something deeper than he said aloud. 2 weeks later, Lily started slowing down. Her energy, once endless, seemed to drain faster than I could understand. She'd play for 10 minutes and then collapse on the couch, out of breath. One afternoon, she was coloring on the floor when she suddenly sat upright and whispered, "Mommy." My heart's beating too fast. I rushed to her side, felt her skin. It was ice cold. Jason drove us straight to the city hospital. I sat in the back seat, holding Lily's tiny hand and whispering that everything would be okay, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. At the hospital, doctors ran tests, blood work, x-rays, scans. We waited in a sterile white room, filled with fluorescent lights and silence. 3 hours later, a physician walked in holding a thick file. His face was calm, but his voice was grave. "We found an abnormal mass in your daughter's left lung," he said. "It appears benign, but it's pressing against her airway. If we don't operate soon, her condition could deteriorate quickly." I felt the floor fall beneath me. I barely heard Jason asking questions, or the doctor explaining what came next. My mind clung to one thing. The surgery had to happen within 3 days. Then came the number. $98,000. No insurance, no time. That was the moment I felt fear in a way I had never known before. Not for myself, but for the one life I couldn't bear to lose. The number kept echoing in my mind. $98,000. Jason and I sat in the hospital room in stunned silence, the hum of machines and distant footsteps in the hallway the only sounds surrounding us. Lily was asleep, her little chest rising and falling unevenly, an IV line running from her arm. Her lips were pale. Her skin had lost its glow. I stared at her, trying to hold back the fear that was growing inside me like a storm. We had around $15,000 in savings, barely a fraction of what we needed. I called the bank that night, asking for an emergency loan. Denied. Our credit score wasn't high enough. We tried applying for medical financing, but it would take too long, and we didn't have time. That night, I posted on social media. A desperate plea, not just for money, but for help spreading the word. Friends messaged me offering prayers. Some shared my post, but the amount was overwhelming. We needed nearly $100,000, and we needed it in 3 days. I stayed by Lily's bedside, her hand resting in mine, listening to her shallow breathing. Every few minutes, a monitor would beep, and my chest would tighten. I had always told myself I didn't need my parents, that I was strong enough on my own. But now, sitting in that sterile room with my daughter hooked to tubes and machines, I felt my pride begin to crumble. I reached for my phone. My fingers trembled as I scrolled to the contact I had nearly deleted more than once. Mom. I hesitated for several minutes, staring at the screen, before finally pressing call. She picked up on the third ring. Her voice was light, almost cheery. "Rachel?" Why are you calling this late? I swallowed hard. Lily's in the hospital, I said. She needs emergency surgery. There's a mass in her lung. We don't have insurance and we can't cover the cost. I'm asking for help. Please, just part of it. I promise I'll pay you back. There was a pause. Too long. Then her voice came back, polite but distant. Rachel, this really isn't a good time. Your father and I are preparing for Brandon's engagement celebration next week. Everything's already booked. Guests, catering, the venue. I blinked, stunned. I'm not asking you to cancel a party. I'm asking for help to save your granddaughter's life. Her tone hardened. You know how important this is for the family's image. We can't jeopardize everything we've planned because of a personal emergency. I'm sorry, Rachel, truly, but we can't help. She hung up. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. Not from shock, but from clarity. All the years of being invisible, of being second to Brandon, of swallowing. Disappointment. They all led to this moment. A child's life was on the line, and my parents chose reputation over compassion. I returned to Lily's bedside, knelt beside her, and wrapped my arms around her fragile frame. I whispered, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's going to figure this out, I promise." Because if my own family could turn their backs on her, then I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I did something I had promised myself I'd never do again. I drove back to the place I once called home. Jason's old car rattled slightly as I pulled into the long, stone-paved driveway of my parents' mansion. The air was crisp, the sun deceptively warm, but I felt none of it. I clutched Lily's medical records against my chest, my hands trembling. The house hadn't changed. White columns, expensive landscaping, the same perfectly manicured hedges that once felt like prison bars. But today, it wasn't just any day. It was the engagement rehearsal party for Brandon and his fiancée Natalie, the daughter of a powerful real estate mogul. The guest list read like a who's who of the city: investors, socialites, executives. As I stepped into the foyer, I turned. I was wearing a simple black coat, my hair tied back, no makeup, looking more like a worn-out assistant than their firstborn daughter. No one greeted me. The music played softly in the background, laughter echoing from the backyard. Servers passed hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. I walked through it all like a ghost, and then I saw her, Marianne, my mother. She stood near the fireplace, sipping champagne, laughing with guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits. I approached her directly. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please, I need just 5 minutes." She looked at me, irritated, as if I were a stain on the floor. "Rachel, I'm entertaining guests. This really isn't the time." I didn't budge. "It's about Lily. She needs surgery. Now. I'm not here for drama. I'm here because I'm desperate." My mother glanced around. Some people nearby began to quiet. She leaned in, whispering sharply, "You're embarrassing yourself, and me. Don't do this here." I reached into my bag and pulled out the documents. The CT scans, the diagnosis, the surgical estimate. "Please," I said, unfolding them on the side table. "Read this. She doesn't have time. We've sold everything we can. I'm not asking for favors. I'm asking for her life." Her eyes flicked over the pages, but her face didn't soften. "The money has already been spent," she said coldly. "On the dress, the catering, the venue. Where do you expect me to get another $100,000? My chest tightened. "You're her grandmother." That's when I saw Gerald, my father, across the room with Brandon and a group of suited men. I made my way over. My father's smile faded the second he saw me. "Rachel," he said sternly, "what is this? Are you trying to ruin your brother's celebration? I looked him in the eye. Dad, I need help. Your granddaughter needs help. I'm not asking you to cancel anything. I'm just asking you to care. Brandon chuckled, sipping his champagne. Because you didn't plan ahead, now we're supposed to clean up your mess? I'm about to get married, and you're begging for handouts. That's low, Rachel. I stared at him, this polished, heartless version of the brother I used to protect as a child. I'm not begging you, I said quietly. I just thought maybe someone here still had a soul. They didn't respond. My father turned away. My mother was already gone. And that was the last time I would ever walk into that house as their daughter. I walked out of that mansion as if my feet weighed 1,000 pounds. Every step down that pristine stone path felt like a goodbye. Not to a place, but to the last shred of hope I had ever held for my family. The only thing that cut deeper than their rejection was the look of complete indifference in their eyes. To them, I wasn't Rachel, their daughter, or even a mother pleading for her child. I was an inconvenience, a crack in their perfect image. When I got back to the hospital, Lily was still asleep. Her hand, still wrapped in medical tape, twitched slightly as I sat beside her bed. I gently ran my fingers through her hair and leaned in close. I promise you, sweetheart, I whispered. Mommy's going to fix this. We don't need anyone else. Jason was waiting just outside the room. I told him everything. The laughter, the cold stares, Brandon's smugness, my father's silence. He didn't say much, just wrapped his arms around me and held me tightly as I shook in his embrace. Then, softly in my ear, he whispered, "We'll save her, whatever it takes. We're not alone." The next morning, we took action. Jason put his beloved truck, the one he'd spent years restoring and the same one we took on our honeymoon, up for sale. I listed my work laptop, our living room sofa, even my engagement ring on online classifieds. I didn't hesitate. Every item was just a thing. Lily was everything. A woman from across town came to see the furniture. She looked around our small apartment and asked, "Are you moving?" I forced a smile. "Something like that," I said, too tired to explain. In 3 days, we managed to raise just under $29,000. It wasn't close to what we needed, but it felt like a lifeline. I started calling every old friend I could think of, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some didn't answer. Others were kind but hesitant. And then there were those I would never forget. Anna, my college roommate, now a music teacher in Kansas, sent $500 with a note. "It's all I can spare this month. I know it's not much, but I believe in Lily. She's going to make it." I cried when I read her message. Then there was Travis, a junior designer who had only worked at my company for 4 months. He walked into my office during his lunch break, holding an envelope. "I have $320, he said shyly. "I was going to use it to buy a new laptop, but I think Lily needs it more." I couldn't even speak. I just hugged him. Day by day, donations trickled in, not from the people who shared my blood, but from the ones who chose compassion over pride. Neighbors, clients, even strangers I had only met once. No one owed me anything, yet they gave time, money, and hope. Still, we were nearly $40,000 short. I started considering high-interest loans, risky, dangerous. But I didn't care. I would sign anything if it meant saving Lily. And then, one evening as I sat by her hospital bed, Jason's parents, Carol and Henry, walked in. They weren't rich, just kind. I expected comfort. Instead, I got something far more powerful: sacrifice. Carol and Henry had always been humble people. They lived in a modest home on the southern edge of Denver, a cozy place filled with hand-knit blankets, old photo albums, and the scent of lemon tea. I never expected more than warm hugs and quiet prayers from them that night. But as they entered Lily's hospital room, something in Henry's expression was different. Calm, yet resolute. "Rachel," he said gently, motioning for Jason and me to step into the hallway. "We need to talk. Tomorrow morning, come to the house. There's something we want to show you." He didn't say more, only placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder before glancing at Lily, his eyes softening with grandfatherly tenderness. She can't wait any longer. The next day, Jason and I arrived at their home early. The living room felt emptier than usual. The couch was missing. So were the paintings that used to line the hallway. Carol came out holding a tray with 2 steaming cups of tea, set them on the table, then handed me a thick stack of papers. I opened them slowly, not understanding at first. A property transfer contract. My eyes landed on the final line. Sale price, $136,000. I blinked. "What is this?" Carol reached for my hand. "We sold the house," she said softly, "to help cover Lily's surgery. It's just a building, Rachel. We can rent a new place. But Lily only has one life." I stared at her, completely stunned. Jason sat frozen beside me, his mouth slightly open. Henry spoke quietly but firmly. "If it were you or Jason lying in that bed, wouldn't we do the same?" The tears came slowly at first, then all at once. I didn't sob. I just sat there, silently weeping, letting the truth of their sacrifice sink in. These people, they weren't bound to me by blood, but they had done what my own parents refused to do. They had chosen love over comfort, family over pride. 3 days later, with the combined contributions and the proceeds from the house sale, we had enough. The hospital scheduled the surgery immediately. The procedure lasted 6 hours, though. To me, it felt like 6 lifetimes. I sat in the waiting room gripping the beaded necklace Lily had made me for my birthday. A simple string of plastic hearts with the words, "Best Mom Ever," scrawled on one of them in faded marker. I didn't move. I barely breathed. When the doctor finally emerged, his face tired but smiling, I felt my legs give out beneath me. "The surgery was a success," he said gently. "She's strong. She's going to be okay." I collapsed into a chair, covering my face as the sobs came, relief washing over me like a flood. That night, I sat by Lily's bedside, watching her chest rise and fall in steady rhythm, her small hand curled around mine. Sunlight spilled gently across the sheets. We had made it. But the memory of that party, the laughter, the dismissive glances, the indifference, still lingered. I knew one day they would understand what they had truly lost. After Lily's discharge from the hospital, I thought the exhaustion would break me. Weeks of sleepless nights, endless calls, paperwork, fear, and heartbreak. I expected to collapse the moment I felt safety return. But I didn't, because something inside me had changed. A quiet fire that had smoldered for years, beneath the rejection, the favoritism, the silence, had finally erupted. I wasn't just working to support my family anymore. I was building something greater. I was rebuilding as the life Jason, Lily, and I deserved, and I was determined to never, ever be in a position where I'd have to beg to save someone I loved. Every morning, I got up at 4:30 a.m. I restructured my business from the ground up. I reviewed every invoice, every contract, every dollar. I learned digital marketing, sharpened my negotiation skills, and enrolled in a weekend real estate design course to expand our services. If I didn't understand something, I stayed up late until I did. By day, I walked job sites with clients. By night, I sketched layouts, answered emails, and wrote proposals while Jason sat nearby doing late-shift estimates for his engineering projects. Lily would sit at the table drawing next to us, occasionally asking how to spell new words for her stories. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were growing. Word about my firm spread. First, it was a boutique cafe in the suburbs, then a yoga studio, then a spa chain. A few months later, I received a call from a developer in Aspen, asking if I'd be interested in designing the interiors for a boutique hotel. It was the biggest project I'd ever been offered, 10 times the size of anything I'd done before. I didn't hesitate. I said yes. 12 months later, my company, Carter Plus Co., signed a $1.2 million contract to design a luxury apartment complex in Denver's booming new district.
We were no longer just a small firm tucked behind a nail salon. We were a serious player in the interior design industry. That's when the media noticed. A reporter from Modern Spaces magazine reached out, asking to do a feature story. When we
met, she asked me, "Rachel, what drove you to push this far, this fast?" I looked at her straight in the eye. I once begged my family to help save my daughter's life. They refused, and that moment taught me that I had to be the one to stand tall. For her, for us. I couldn't wait to be rescued. I had to become the pillar she could lean on. The article went viral. People resonated with the story. Not just the success, but the strength that came from being broken and choosing to rise anyway. Soon after, I was invited to New York to appear on Voices of Resilience, a talk show that spotlighted ordinary people overcoming extraordinary circumstances. Under the studio lights, I shared everything, from being ignored as a child to walking out of my parents' mansion with nothing but hope in my hands. The host, a sharp, seasoned woman, leaned in and asked, "If you could say one thing to the people who abandoned you when you needed them most, what would it be?" I paused, then smiled. "Thank you, because you taught me how to find my true family, the one built on love, not legacy." After the episode aired, everything changed. My inbox flooded with messages from mothers, daughters, even grown men, who had been pushed aside by the very people who were supposed to love them most. They told me my story gave them hope, that, for the first time, they felt seen, but something else happened too, something I hadn't anticipated. Within days, clips from the show began circulating online. A viral post titled, "Parents Spend Hundreds of Thousands on Engagement Party, Refuse to Save Granddaughter," racked up over 500,000 shares in just 48 hours. People connected the dots. They realized I was Rachel Carter, daughter of Gerald, and Marianne Carter, owners of Carter's Living, the upscale furniture store in town. They connected me to Brandon Carter, the local real estate broker who once bragged on LinkedIn about his $330,000 engagement ring. Suddenly, it wasn't just my story anymore, it was a reckoning. Customers started leaving one-star reviews on my parents' business. Suppliers quietly pulled out of contracts. Longtime partners distanced themselves. No one wanted to be associated with the family who abandoned a child for the sake of image. A week later, I received word from a former classmate. Carter's Living was temporarily shutting down due to financial and legal strain. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel smug or vindicated. What I felt was an odd, hollow stillness, like an old wound reopening, not to bleed, but to breathe. Then came Brandon, the golden boy, the pride of the family, the man who smirked while I begged for my daughter's life. Now, his name was plastered across the internet, but not for the reasons he wanted. People called him the brother who laughed at his niece's suffering. Clients dropped him. His engagement to Natalie, the real estate heiress, crumbled in silence. She didn't issue a statement. She just removed every photo, every trace of him from her socials, then filed to end the engagement. Later, I found out she had confronted my parents, asked them directly if what she read was true. They didn't. Deny it. She walked out of their apartment and never looked back. Brandon couldn't take the fallout. One night he called me. His voice was low, strained. "What did you do?" I took a deep breath. I told the truth. You made everyone think I'm some kind of monster. I didn't make anyone think anything, I replied calmly. If the truth makes you feel ashamed, maybe the problem isn't the story, it's what you did. He didn't respond, just hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. But a few weeks later, a pale yellow envelope arrived in the mail. Neat. Cursive. No return address. I recognized it instantly. My mother. The letter inside was short, but heavy. They had lost everything. The mansion was being listed for sale. Brandon was unemployed. And Carter's living was on the verge of bankruptcy. We were wrong, she wrote. I know that now. Please, if you still have any mercy left, help us. I held the letter in my hands for a long time, then folded it carefully and slid it into a drawer. I didn't feel hatred. I didn't feel triumph. What I felt was peace. Because I finally knew I didn't need their love to be whole. I didn't respond to the letter, not immediately, not out of spite, but because I needed time to think, to remember everything. The sound of Marianne's voice when she told me I was tarnishing the family image, the way Gerald turned away from me as if my pain was inconvenient, not real. And Brandon, his champagne glass raised, his smirk cutting deeper than any insult. I thought about Lily in that hospital bed, about the shallow breaths, the IV line, the way she held my hand in her sleep. I thought about Carol and Henry, wrapping their dishes in newspaper, moving out of the home they'd cherished for 30 years, without a single complaint. And I realized something with brutal clarity. Some losses can't be fixed with money. A week passed before I picked up the phone. I didn't call. I sent a formal email. If you want help, come to my office, in person. 2 days later, they arrived. Not in a chauffeur-driven car, not with designer coats or polished smiles. They looked small, tired. Gerald's once dark hair was streaked with gray. Marianne clutched a worn leather purse, her posture not quite as upright as it used to be. I led them into the conference room on the 3rd floor of my company. The sun streamed through the windows, casting golden light across the polished wood table. A black suitcase sat at the center. Inside, exactly $200,000, withdrawn in cash at their request. Gerald stared at it as if it might disappear. Marianne's eyes welled up. Before they could reach for it, I raised my hand. Wait. They both froze. This money isn't a gift. It's not a loan either. It's closure. After today, we're done. Marianne's lips quivered. Rachel, you don't mean that. I do, I said, voice steady. Because family doesn't ignore their own grandchild's suffering. Family doesn't tell their daughter her pain is inconvenient. Family doesn't raise a glass while a child lies in a hospital bed. Tears slipped down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm not looking for an apology, I replied. I'm setting boundaries. She moved to speak again, but I stopped her. From this moment on, we're not in each other's lives. No more visits, no calls, no requests. You may take the money and walk out of this building for the last time. Gerald didn't argue. He just nodded and picked up the suitcase, his hands shaking. I walked them to the elevator myself. They didn't look back. When the doors closed, I stood there for a long time, staring at the steel panel. Not sad, not angry, just free. That night, I told Jason and Carol what had happened. Carol didn't say much, only reached for my hand across the kitchen table and squeezed it gently. Jason leaned in, his eyes soft. You did the right thing, and I knew he was right, because this wasn't revenge. It was a release. a decision to choose peace over pain. My past had knocked, and I had answered, not with bitterness, but with finality. I didn't owe them forgiveness. But I did owe Lily a mother who could move forward, unburdened. After that final meeting, I never heard from them again. No calls, no letters, no more desperate appeals. And strangely, I didn't feel empty. I didn't feel the sting of guilt I had always assumed would follow if I ever turned them away. Just felt peace. Because I had chosen the right people to keep. The ones who stayed when it hurt. The ones who gave, even when they had little. The ones who showed love, not through grand gestures or polished words, but through action, through sacrifice, through presence. Our home was no longer haunted by the silence of what I'd lost. It echoed instead with laughter, the scent of pancakes in the morning, and Lily's drawings taped messily on the walls. Carol tended a small herb garden by the kitchen window. Henry and Jason talked for hours about home repairs and weekend fishing. And Lily, my brave, beautiful girl, was healthy, strong, and happy. We even had more news to celebrate. We were expecting another child. I decided to build a new house, not a mansion, not something to impress anyone. Just a warm, open space with enough room for all of us, a real home. It sat on the outskirts of Denver, overlooking rolling hills that turned gold in the fall and white in the winter. Every morning, I woke to the sound of Lily giggling with her grandparents in the kitchen, Jason flipping through blueprints in his office, and the peaceful hum of a life I built with nothing but grit, grace, and love. And I never forgot the people who helped us get here. I visited Anna, my college friend, the one who sent $500 when it was all she had. She still drove the same dented red car, still wore the old sweater she used to patch with yarn. I handed her an envelope. Inside, a check large enough to open the music school she'd dreamed about since we were 19. "You saved my daughter," I said. "Now it's time I help you build something beautiful." She cried in my arms. Then there was Travis, the junior designer who gave me his laptop money. By now, he was one of our top architects. I awarded him a full scholarship to a design institute in Chicago. His eyes lit up with purpose and gratitude. And Carol and Henry, their old home, which they had once sold to save Lily's life? I quietly tracked it down, bought it back, and gave it to them on Carol's birthday. When she opened the box with the keys inside, she didn't say a word. Just cried, her hands shaking. "Welcome home," I whispered. But my favorite moment came one morning, when Lily ran into my room and climbed into bed beside me. She threw her arms around my neck and whispered, "Mom, I had a dream last night. You were a superhero." I smiled through tears. "I think you saved me first. This is the life I chose. A life rooted in love, not legacy. In kindness, not obligation. In boundaries, not guilt. And if one day the people who hurt you come back seeking help, ask yourself this: is your peace worth breaking? Because sometimes walking away isn't cruel. It's healing. And sometimes, you don't need revenge to win, just peace to begin.